If you are new to our channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Garden Radio Show with your host, Joey Halle-Berry.
There's many different techniques in which you can garden. Raised beds, traditional ground containers, straw bale gardening. There is one that many people have done and then felt it wasn't as great as they portrayed it to be or read about it, maybe because the procedure in which they followed was not correct. This is called Back to Eden gardening. There is a big movie about this.
Right, so Back to Eden Garden is it's a really great concept, and if you do it correctly, people love it. But as Joey had mentioned, sometimes people don't do things correctly. We hear this with the straw bales all the time. So you have to follow the procedure, the process.
So here's the overall umbrella of what the Back to Eden garden method is, and we'll break this down into the steps in which it will be successful in your particular location. The concept is you get wood chips, you pile it on the ground, and you let the wood chips break down, hold moisture, prevent weeds, and you have this phenomenal garden that produces extremely heavily for you with a minimal amount of work. That's the concept. That's that little nutshell.
And you're not supposed to really get weeds either.
Right.
Right.
So here there are several steps in which you need to follow to achieve this magnificent end result of this minimal to no weed garden that holds the moisture, that has a magazine cover type of garden picture production, that whole thing. So
the first one is after you choose the area, you choose your area, and it has to be an area that you're going to commit to gardening for some time, basically. So it's not just like, I might want to grow here, but I don't know, and maybe in a few years I might not want to grow here. It's like it's a permaculture idea.
And people will say, well, how small do I need this to be, or how big do I need this to be? Really, it's not a bad concept to have, the whole backyard in this, because if you do it right, you don't have to, even if you don't plant anything in a particular location, you don't have to deal with mowing the grass. You don't have to do with, that type of thing. But you can do it small scale. But 4x4 raised 4x4 area, I would want to do it a little larger because of the time that the investment you put into this. It will pay dividends. Obviously, it worked great, man. I wish I would have made it bigger. So that type of thing. I would go 20 by 20. That would be my starting size.
Right. So, yeah. So then you cover the area with newspaper. Now, if you have ginormous weeds growing in that area or tall grass, you want to cut that down. Possibly, you don't have to pull the grass out, pull the weeds out, but you want to make sure that you're not just trying to place newspaper on top of
mow it down to the dirt.
Right.
Yeah.
So you do that, and then you're going to cover it with compost. So whatever kind of compost you want, whether it be something like Purple Cow, whether it be manure, you need to just cover it with compost. Probably about a good inch or so, I would say.
1 to 3 inches. Let's just go. Because people think, Back to Eden, put wood chips down, plant in the wood chips, I'm good to go. What they're failing to understand is wood chips does not contain the nutrients, and seeds don't germinate very well in wood chips, or very minimal to no germination. So you have to have some type of bedding material in order for these seeds or plant starts to live off of while the wood chips break down and put that layer of barrier between the soil and the atmosphere of the world.
Right. So you put down the compost, and then you're going to cover it with 6 inches of wood chips. You kind of want to mimic the forest floor. Now, when you use these wood chips, you want to make sure you know where they're coming from, because you're going to grow food into these wood chips, essentially.
You don't want a dyed wood chip. You want a natural wood chip. There are groups, companies that you can get a hold of that will bring wood chips to your property.
If you search Back to Eden Gardening on their website, there's a wood chip finder link.
Locator.
So that you can find the proper wood chips.
It's not 100% wood chips. You need something that has limbs, branches, leaves to create that layering effect, that lasagna layering effect, where there's gaps and air pockets. It's not just a solid block of wood chips like a particle board that's been compressed. You need that air so water can penetrate through and not create this solid mat of wood on top of that soil. So you want that variety of material in that wood chip mixture.
Right. So that's exactly what you want and need, is something that is going to essentially mimic the forest floor.
And we put the compost underneath that wood chips because forest floor, what's going on in the forest? You got animals, critters, microbial life producing manure, fertilizing the soil, and feeding the plant life in the on the lower levels of that forest floor. The leaves fall, create a layer of coverage, and then the cycle continues, and that's why the forest floor is so rich in nutrients and so healthy, because that constant cycle of compost, leaves, breakdown material.
Right. So we have the wood chips, and we have on top of the compost, on top of the newspaper, on top of the ground. So then at this point you are ready to plant. So what you would do is you basically you don't plant the plants in the wood chips.
Right.
You kind of move them aside and you plant them in that compost.
Right, and then you bring the wood chips back once, if you got plant start or the seeds, have germinated, create a little drill there. But, and you do not want to mix wood chips into that compost in which you plant it.
No, that's why you want to layer it.
And this is a no-till, a no-dig type of concept. Now, there may be some people do potatoes very successfully in this type of situation, root crops, that type of thing, when it comes to, even though you have a small layer of compost. If you allow this to occur 5, 6, 8 years down the road, you will have to layer more wood chips on, because the wood chips break down, create a compost material, and feed the soil. And then as you dig, if you did an experiment 8 years down the road and you took a little spot and dug into the soil in which you covered, you will be amazed that 8, 9, 12, 15 inches below soil level, you have good, rich, fertile organic matter, soil, black. It has fed that soil, it has increased the depth of the topsoil layer naturally underneath that wood chip bed in which you created nearly a decade ago.
Right, exactly. So, so that's exactly what you're going to do. People love it, but again, you have to do it the correct way. Just like anything, if you don't, you're just going to
take shortcuts. You're going to be disappointed.
Right, and you have to want to invest in some time. It's not going. I mean, you can plant it right away, but for it to break down, feed the soil, become its own little ecosystem, it's going to take some time.
Yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of people, wood chips, put it on the ground, plant in them, done, and it doesn't work. They get discouraged. They put posts on their blog, website, whatever, videos. Oh, this didn't work. This is a bunch of fill in the blank. But it really...
And I just want to mention, because we might get a question like, why can't I just put wood chips over my garden where it is now? You can, especially if you are in a raised bed situation. But you don't want to mix them in, because they will take the nitrogen from your soil. And you want to be aware of when you're moving them around to plant your plants.
And if you've already got a raised bed, you've got tremendously good soil in there. You've brought soil in, so I would just use a mulch, shredded leaves, chemical-free grass clippings, straw, and go that route. Now this is really a beneficial procedure for an area that has never been gardened before. You've done a soil test. You found the soil is not toxic, and then you've created this environment. There is a individual in New Jersey. His YouTube channel is James Prigiani, and he did this. He created a food forest essentially in the urban area of New Jersey in his parents' backyard 7 years ago, and it looks like you wouldn't believe what it is now. He's got dozens of fruit trees and plants growing everywhere, and he produces hundreds of thousands of pounds of food each year off this urban lot that was a backyard of his parents' house. So it can be done even in an urban setting. On a vacant lot. Again, toxicity, make sure you're okay with that. So the Back to Eden Garden method, it's not something Holly and I have practiced yet. No. This would be something that when we get a property, that we would dedicate a certain area for that particular application and do multiple different methods of gardening just for our enjoyment. But it does work very, very well. There's many videos online that show the success and the value of doing a Back to Eden Garden method. Thank you for checking out the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show. For more, go to the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for full-length in-studio video and podcast replay of Season 1. Season 2 underway and added weekly. Tweet us at TWVG Show or hashtag TWVG to be part of the program.